The evening air was thick and heavy, carrying a faint scent of rain that had begun to fall outside. Emma stood by the kitchen window, her fingers pressed lightly against the cold glass, tracing abstract patterns without thinking. The droplets raced down the pane in tiny rivers, reflecting the dim light of the kitchen. She didn't notice. Her mind was a storm, chaotic and restless. Every memory of the past few months crowded in on her, and her chest ached with a mixture of sadness, frustration, and a faint lingering love that refused to vanish completely. She could hear the soft hum of the refrigerator, the distant rumble of traffic beyond the small garden, and then the quiet sound of footsteps behind her. Emma. Kevin's voice was low, almost hesitant, yet it carried a weight she had not felt in years. Her heart twisted, not from affection, but from the raw, complicated knot of emotions that had built up over time. She didn't turn to face him immediately. She didn't need to. The sound of his voice was enough to make the air between them thicken. He came closer, careful, almost apologetic in the way he moved. The faint scent of his cologne lingered in the kitchen air, a scent she had once loved, but now associated with unease. "Please," Kevin said again, softer this time, almost like he was begging, though the word never fully left his lips. His hand reached out almost instinctively toward her shoulder. Emma flinched, stepping back slightly, her coat brushing against the counter. Her eyes finally met his, and she saw the panic there, the regret that seemed to weigh him down. But she also saw the arrogance, the carelessness, the way he had taken her trust for granted. Her hand rose instinctively, not aggressively, but firmly, creating a barrier she could not, would not, allow him to cross. "Don't touch me, Kevin," she whispered, her voice calm but resolute. The words themselves felt like a sharp knife, slicing through the lingering tension and the memories that tied them together. Kevin froze, the mug in his hands trembling slightly as he lowered it. His eyes searched hers, trying to find a crack, a weakness, any sign that she would relent, that she would let him come closer. But there was none. She was steady, immovable, like a rock in the middle of a storm. Emma turned toward the door, her coat slipping over her shoulders, the fabric brushing lightly against her arms. Kevin's gaze followed her, frantic now, his voice rising in desperation. "Emma, wait. We can fix this. I can fix this. Please, just listen." But she didn't. She had already made her decision. She had spent nights lying awake, replaying every small betrayal, every hidden message, every glance that no longer held trust. She had loved him once, deeply, completely, but love alone could not erase the growing distance between them. The realization had come slowly, painfully, that sometimes love needed honesty to survive. And honesty had been absent from their home for too long. Her hand rested on the doorknob, cold metal under her fingers, and for a brief second she hesitated. Not because she doubted her choice, but because the years they had spent together, the laughter, the quiet mornings, the shared dreams, threatened to pull her back. But the memories alone were not enough. They had become ghosts in a house that no longer felt like a home. With a deep, steadying breath, she turned the knob and stepped out into the night. The rain had intensified outside, falling in steady sheets, soaking the garden path and the edges of the driveway. Emma pulled her coat tighter around her, welcoming the cold and the wet as if it could wash away the confusion and the lingering sorrow. Each step she took was deliberate, a silent affirmation that she was choosing herself, her peace, over a relationship that had begun to erode under the weight of secrets and unspoken betrayals. Kevin remained in the kitchen, staring at the closed door, his hands gripping the counter for support. The mug he had been holding now sat forgotten, half full and cooling. He had wanted to reach for her, to pull her back, to explain, to beg, to promise that it would never happen again. But the words wouldn't come. They never did when it mattered most. And even if they did, would they be enough? He didn't know. He couldn't know because he had already taken too much for granted, allowed too many small cracks to form, and now the chasm between them seemed too wide to cross. Emma walked down the driveway, her shoes splashing softly in the puddles forming on the concrete. The streetlights cast a muted glow on the wet asphalt, reflecting her silhouette as she moved. She didn't look back, not even once. Looking back would have invited weakness, and she had resolved to remain strong. Each step was a small act of rebellion against the fear, against the heartbreak, against the voice inside her that whispered, "What if you regret this?" But regret was a companion she could not entertain tonight. Tonight, she had chosen clarity, even if it meant pain. As she reached the edge of the garden, memories flashed through her mind. The first time Kevin had held her hand so gently. The evenings they had spent talking for hours about nothing and everything. The quiet laughter they shared over breakfast on lazy Sunday mornings. The warmth of those moments made her chest ache. A reminder of what once was, but she forced herself to keep moving. Memories could not undo reality. Memories could not heal what had been broken. Kevin's voice, pleading and fractured, echoed faintly in her mind. She imagined him reaching for her, the desperation in his eyes, the faint hope that she might turn back. But she did not. Not this time. She had given him enough chances, enough time, enough faith. And now she understood that sometimes the bravest thing a person could do was walk away in silence, carrying the weight of heartbreak without saying a word. The rain grew heavier, pounding against the roof of the car she had parked at the end of the driveway. Emma opened the door, the cold metal biting at her fingers, and slid into the seat. She started the engine, the quiet rumble filling the interior. As she drove away, the lights of their house faded into the distance, replaced by the blur of the rain-slicked street. She didn't look back, didn't turn her head because the act of leaving required more than courage. It required resolve. And she had found it in the quiet, determined rhythm of her own heartbeat. Kevin remained behind, staring at the empty doorway. The rain fell harder, drumming against the windows and roof, a reflection of the storm inside him. He had wanted to reach out, to explain, to fix things, but he had waited too long. He had let the subtle signs of drifting apart grow into a canyon, and now all that remained was emptiness and regret. The house felt hollow, the silence oppressive. The coffee he had made sat untouched, cold, like the remnants of a warmth that had once filled their home. Emma drove through the streets, rain blurring the lights and shapes around her. Each drop against the windshield mirrored the tears she refused to shed. Each puddle she passed reflected the life she was leaving behind. She didn't know exactly what the future held, but for the first time in months she felt a strange sense of liberation. She had chosen herself, chosen honesty, chosen clarity. It was painful, yes, but it was also necessary. The storm inside her had begun to settle, replaced by a quiet determination to move forward. As the car glided through the night, Emma thought of Kevin not with anger, not with resentment, but with a sorrowful understanding. People change, situations evolve, and sometimes love, even when genuine, cannot survive the shadows of mistrust and betrayal. She had loved him fully, and perhaps he had loved her too. But the circumstances had shifted, leaving them on opposite sides of a divide that could not easily be bridged. Hours later, she arrived at a small park near the edge of the city where the rain had slowed to a gentle drizzle. She parked the car and stepped out, feeling the wet grass beneath her shoes. The world was quiet, save for the soft patter of water and the distant hum of the city. She walked toward the benches, her coat clinging to her hair, damp and plastered to her face. Sitting down, she finally allowed herself a deep, shuddering breath. For the first time that evening, she felt the weight of everything she had endured, the weight of everything she was leaving behind. And somewhere in the stillness, beneath the fading storm, a sense of peace began to settle around her. Had chosen herself, she had walked away without a word. And though the path ahead was uncertain, Emma knew, in the quiet strength of her decision, that she had done the right thing. Emma walked through the quiet streets, the night still damp from the earlier rain. Each step was deliberate, echoing softly against the empty sidewalks. Her coat clung to her, wet and heavy, but she hardly noticed. The physical discomfort was nothing compared to the storm inside her chest. Her heart throbbed with a mixture of sorrow and relief, a strange conflicting sense that leaving had been both the hardest and the rightest choice she had ever made. She didn't glance back. Every instinct told her not to. Looking back would only invite weakness. And weakness had no place in the decision she had made. The city seemed different at night, even in the rain. Streetlights reflected off puddles in long, shimmering lines, making everything appear fragile and transient, like the emotions she was carrying. She passed the small bakery where she and Kevin had once stopped for late-night pastries, laughing at nothing in particular. The memory struck her suddenly, sharp and bittersweet, and she felt a pang of longing. But she kept walking. Memories, she realized, were not enough to undo months of mistrust. They were simply reminders of what had been lost. Her phone buzzed faintly in her pocket, but she ignored it. Kevin's name flashed on the screen, his tone likely pleading or apologetic or both. She didn't care. She had made it clear once, firmly, that he should not touch her, that his proximity now only reminded her of pain. That boundary was not negotiable. She had learned painfully that some relationships could not survive deceit. Even when love remained, Emma finally arrived at the old pier near the lake, a place she had loved since childhood. She had spent countless afternoons there, reading, thinking, imagining a future that now seemed distant and unreachable. The pier was slick with rain, the wood dark and damp beneath her shoes. She stepped carefully to the edge, letting the water ripple beneath her feet. The lake mirrored the night sky, dark and calm, disturbed only by the gentle fall of raindrops. She let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding, a deep, shuddering exhale that carried with it the tension, grief, and frustration of weeks spent in silence and hidden disappointment. Back in the house, Kevin sat in the living room, the empty space beside him pressing down like a weight he could not lift. The coffee he had left untouched was cold, the steam long vanished. He tried to call her once, twice, even 3 times, each attempt a desperate reach across a distance he had created with his own mistakes. The phone screen glared at him with unanswered calls, unread messages, each one a testament to his failure. Each one a reminder that he had let her slip away while he hesitated, ignored, or underestimated the importance of honesty, he thought. Of the countless times he had assumed she would forgive him automatically, the times he had believed their love could survive small betrayals, and now he saw the truth. Love without trust, without respect, without care, was fragile, could crumble quietly like a house of cards until one day it fell completely apart. And that day had come. Emma sat at the end of the pier, legs dangling over the edge, staring at the water as if it held answers. She traced circles with her fingers, watching the ripples spread outward, each one fading into the darkness. In her heart, there was grief not just for Kevin, not just for their relationship, but for the dreams and promises that had quietly dissolved. The laughter, the small comforts, the shared mornings, the whispered conversations, all of it had been taken for granted, and now it was gone. And yet, amid the sorrow, there was clarity. She had made the choice to leave, and in that choice, she found strength. Kevin paced the living room, hands running through his hair, mind racing. He imagined her walking in the rain, her coat wet, her hair plastered to her face. He imagined the determined set of her jaw, the unyielding look in her eyes that had stopped him in the kitchen. That memory alone, vivid and piercing, was enough to make his chest tighten with regret. He had taken her for granted, had assumed her patience would never run out, had believed that love alone could cover mistakes that required honesty, care, and attention. And now he realized the gravity of his errors. Emma's mind wandered back to the moments that had led her here. The subtle signs she had once ignored. A lingering glance that didn't feel right. A message left unanswered. A promise broken quietly, almost invisibly. At the time, she had pushed them aside, hoping for explanations, hoping for change, hoping for the man she had once trusted to reappear. But those moments had accumulated like drops of rain on her skin, eventually forming a storm that could not be contained. And the storm had carried her out the door, away from the home she had loved and the man she had trusted. The night deepened. Around her, the lake stretching endlessly, dark and quiet. Emma pulled her coat tighter, shivering not just from the cold but from the raw ache of emotions she had carried in silence. She thought of Kevin, imagined him alone in their kitchen, perhaps realizing too late the depth of the hurt he had caused. She wondered if he would ever truly understand that her leaving was not about anger or malice, but about self-respect, about the need to preserve the parts of herself that had been quietly neglected. Kevin sank into the couch, exhausted, mentally and emotionally. The house felt unbearably empty, each room echoing with the absence of her presence. He thought of the words he had wanted to say, the apologies he had rehearsed but never delivered, the promises he had made silently in his mind. Now, those words felt useless, as if the act of speaking them could not undo the pain, the mistrust, the deliberate boundary she had drawn. And he knew, deep down, that she was gone physically and emotionally. Emma stood at the edge of the pier, staring into the water as if it held the future. She let herself remember the good times, not to dwell, but to acknowledge that they had existed. She remembered the first time Kevin had held her hand in public, the way he had smiled at her during lazy Sunday mornings, the quiet evenings where they had simply been together without words. Those memories were precious, but they were not enough to tether her to a life that no longer felt whole. The night was quiet except for the soft rustle of leaves in the wind and the occasional splash of water against the pier. Emma closed her eyes for a moment, letting the sounds fill her mind, grounding her, allowing her to breathe. She had chosen herself, chosen her clarity, chosen the path that would allow her to heal. And while the weight of leaving Kevin behind pressed on her heart, she felt a faint spark of hope. Hope that the future, whatever it held, would be better because she had taken control of her life and emotions. Meanwhile, Kevin sat with his head in his hands, replaying every mistake he had made. He thought of the small betrayals, the moments he had overlooked, the times he had assumed her patience would never end. Each memory was like a thorn, piercing him over and over, reminding him that love could not survive without care. He had loved her, truly, but love alone had never been enough. Now he understood the depth of what he had lost, the finality of her decision, and the painful truth that sometimes, once trust is broken, nothing can repair it. Emma began to walk back toward her car, her feet leaving gentle impressions in the wet gravel. Each step was deliberate, a reminder that she was moving forward, even if the weight of the night and the memories pressed down upon her. She climbed into the car, the warmth of the interior a small comfort against the cold night. She started the engine and let the car glide slowly down the quiet streets, the reflection of streetlights on the wet pavement creating a shimmering, dreamlike path ahead. As she drove, her mind wandered, not to Kevin in anger or despair, but to herself. She thought of the courage it had taken to leave, of the clarity she had found in making the choice that preserved her dignity and emotional well-being. She thought of the future, of possibilities that had once seemed impossible because her focus had always been on someone else. And for the first time in months, she felt a faint sense of liberation, a quiet determination to face what lay ahead with strength and grace. Kevin, meanwhile, remained in the empty house, staring at the walls that had once felt warm and alive. He realized painfully that love without honesty, love without attention, love without care was fragile. He had believed in the permanence of their bond, but permanence requires effort, and he had neglected it. Now he was left with absence, with emptiness, with a longing that could not be fulfilled. And perhaps, worst of all, he was left with the knowledge that he had failed the person who had trusted him most. Emma stopped the car at a small overlook on the outskirts of the city, where the lake stretched out under the moonlight. The water was calm, reflecting the silver of the moon and the scattered stars above. She stepped out of the car, letting the cool air wash over her, letting the silence wrap around her like a protective cloak. She breathed deeply, the crisp night air filling her lungs, clearing her mind. She had chosen herself, chosen clarity, and chosen a path that, while painful, was necessary. Kevin would have to wait. She knew. For now, the separation was complete. And perhaps, one day, he would understand that leaving was not abandonment, was survival. And perhaps, one day, she would find peace, knowing that she had acted with integrity, strength, and love for herself, even in the face of heartbreak.